Welcome to the Analytics Power Hour. Analytics topics covered conversationally and sometimes with explicit language. Here are your hosts, Mo, Michael, and Tim.
Hey there, it's the Analytics Power Hour, and this is episode 181. Just picture it. There I was, standing in front of a room full of usability professionals on World Usability Day. I was trying to explain why we should be friends, and that was more than 10 years ago. And actually, the synergy between professionals who leverage qualitative data and the fields that supports and quantitative data is still really strong. Sometimes I think it can feel a little daunting to dive into the world of qualitative data, especially for us sort of more quantitative data types. But there's a lot of similarities, but it also feels different. I don't know, Mo, do you have any surveys in flight right now?
I am always running surveys. I actually sent a survey 2 days ago. I just forgot about it. I just remembered.
Oh my goodness.
Big survey fan.
Awesome. What about you, Tim? You ever sit there and facilitate some usability sessions?
I too like to field surveys and not just collect the data but do nothing with it. Forget that I have done so.
Oh, well, that's good, because actually we could talk about that. I feel like a lot of companies do exactly that. Well, we needed someone who could kind of bring it together for us, an expert, somebody with a little more time in the field and experience on the ground. So we found Jenni Bruckman. She's the Vice President of Customer Success and Strategic Partnerships at Wevo. Prior to that, she spent time in optimization leadership roles, both at Accenture, Clearhead, Blue Acorn, and Brooks Bell. And today she is our guest. Welcome to the show, Jenni.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great. Well, why don't you do something to help us all kick it off? Because I don't think many of us know what Wevo is, and also give us a little background about you, because you've obviously been in the space for quite some time and done a lot of really cool work, but it'd be good to hear a little more about your background.
Yeah, I feel like all of our paths were inevitably going to cross at some point. So as I told you off air, this is my career peak right here. I've reached the pinnacle. So yeah, it's such a small world, I think, in digital optimization especially. And so I've kind of worked in that agency optimization A/B testing side for the past decade plus. If I start to get more specific than that, I feel old, so I don't. And really just focusing on helping different orgs, different brands, B2B, B2C, stand up and really expand and enhance their A/B testing and optimization programs, sometimes dabbling into personalization, but mostly on the testing front. Got out of it for a little while and went more toward the implementation side and quickly realized I missed measurement. I missed being able to prove that things worked or didn't. And so jumped back in with Clearhead and Accenture a few years ago, and in the past couple of years stumbled upon Wevo as a new tool in the kit and did something I'd never done. I loved it so much from both a qualitative and quantitative standpoint. It felt like a breath of fresh air that I'd been kind of waiting to see in the industry for so long. And so I knocked on their door and I said, hey, I love this team. I love this product. I'd love to come build out, a partner program and help other agencies do what we've done together and really start to expand that effort and that benefit. So that's the fun job I get to do today, is just have conversations like this and figure out how we layer all those really cool things together.
It's the same way that Oracle grows their team. People just love the product and think,
Oh, jeez.
There went your Thanksgiving dinner invitation, Tim, right there.
All right, so let's jump into it. And so I think maybe it might be a good idea to start just around maybe defining sort of what we're talking about in terms of qualitative data and sort of like maybe layering in or taking away some of the confusion around it.
Yeah, for sure. So I came heavy from the quantitative side. I worked with people who were way smarter than me to do all the number crunching and brilliant data sciencey things that you all do and that your listeners do on a regular basis. And so I came from that idea of a cross-functional pod, primarily being there to drive forward experience optimization. So you've got your UX design, your development team, your project management, your strategic direction, and then you've got your analytics. And what was always this missing piece on that wheel was being able to answer the why. We all would hypothesize about the why. We would all really drill into, here are all the different roadmap problems that we've identified. Let's build it based on, what we think we need to pull this lever first or second. And the challenge became we would always have to pull in these different kind of varied qualitative and quantitative combinations to really figure out if our why was correct and prove that hypothesis. And so I really saw this big opportunity cost of a lot of time to iteration to figure out if we were pulling the right levers and solving for the right problems, or if we needed to go in a different direction. And the benefit of qualitative to me was answering that why. And so the challenge that I saw over and over again was that qualitative is typically very small sample size, and to do it well, it's typically very labor and expertise intensive, and that's very hard to scale. So I could extrapolate on that for ages of how I kind of see the similar trend line that I think A/B testing saw. We're going to see that demand for UX research. We're seeing it now, and we'll see it in the near future. But really being able to scale that at a way that makes insights more accessible across those cross-functional teams is really where I think the magic happens.
I don't want to even tell you how many job ads there are for qual researchers at the moment,
right?
At Canva, for example.
But
it is one of those things, like a company reaches a certain point of like scale in its size and like data evolution, and then suddenly something's missing. And I have to be honest, when I think of qual research, I typically do explain it as like, this is going to help us answer the why. And as you were saying that, I'm like, does it always, or does it only help us understand the why if it's done really well?
So 1,000% agree. And that's what we always struggled with, is the scalability of answering the why to do it well, to do it responsibly was the challenge. And, frankly, that's where I fell in love with Wevo as a platform, is figuring out there has to be a way to standardize this. There has to be a way to say, we've iterated and proven this ability to ask the right questions in the right way to the right audiences, but then do that at a much greater quantitative scale. It shouldn't be about 6 people's decision. Sometimes there are use cases where that's the better fit. You really need to observe the error that they're hitting in a password reset flow or something like that. And it's very specific to an individual user. But for the most part, the why needs to be reliably viewed across a greater volume of people. And so to your point, it's exactly what I agree with, is it has to be responsibly collected and not just anecdotal in order to really be a reliable driver for the impact of the roadmap.
How consistently defined is qualitative? I feel like the qualitative gets used, and sometimes there's behavioral is quantitative, attitudinal is qualitative, or if it's objective, it's quantitative, if it's subjective, it's qualitative. And I'm not clear if is there a hard black line that defines whether something is, if you ask somebody, if it's a Likert scale on a survey, they're providing a hard number that we can perform math on, but it's an attitudinal subjective measure. Like, is there a definition, or is it kind of a squishy threshold as to whether something is quantitative or qualitative, or is it depends on what you do with it? You can have the same piece of data, could be both.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to sample size. So you take a lot of that squishiness out when you collect that attitudinal data in a quantifiable way, when you collect it at a great enough scale that you can see, here are the real trends of truth and here's the noise, right? And I think there are a variety of different methodologies, and they all kind of have a strength for different use cases. Card sorting and tree testing is enormously valuable in early prototyping and kind of idea generation of how are we architecting this experience and are we building it the right way. Moderated, video-based testing is going to be more powerful if, like I said, you really need to observe that specific point of friction. But then that's the minority of the volume of feedback that you need. The majority of volume of feedback that you need is, my story was I kept running A/B tests, and how often do we all run into a test idea that's like, that should have won. And you have the best data scientists and the best analysts and everybody. There's truth in the quant. Everybody knows and trusts the data. You got stat sig. You know that it didn't win, or it was flat and it shouldn't have been, and you don't have the luxury of running it forever. So then you want to understand why, and you can run a big enough test of qual to get that truth versus noise, that real signal versus noise. And then you suddenly understand, and it's like that light bulb moment goes off. So I think it's about sample size, to your question, Tim.
So, I mean, in taking to an extreme though, like if I had 100,000 open-end responses to a survey, I guess I would have enough text data. That would still be, because I have a large enough sample. I mean, is that?
Yeah, I mean, there are ways to organize it in a thoughtful way, right? You start to identify some themes, and then you start to see which themes of data are statistically significant. All of that is the really heavy lifting that takes teams so long. And I think the teams that are doing qual and quant really well are those that have those super experts, like a UX researcher embedded in a center of excellence, the same way that we saw that trend in optimization with data science and analytics early on. But then they have a tool set that makes insights more democratizable across a team, that you know and trust that the way the qual is being collected is a reliable method. And it's not just left to the luxury of whoever's launching that test to kind of butcher, well, it should be a Likert. Actually, it should have been a multiple choice and have an open-ended qual to follow it. You know, it's creating it the first time really well, and then scaling that in a responsible way to get that massive data of understanding that why.
I am suddenly having this experience of feeling like I am so out of my depth. Like, you know that feeling of like, I know qual research, like this is something that I'm always advocating for, I'm a big believer in, and suddenly I'm like, oh shit, like I really need to know a lot more than I know. Like you even mentioned a couple of terms that there was something about trees and cards, and I was like, what is she talking about?
And to be fair, I know your listeners will probably call bullshit on a lot of the depth if we kept talking about it. That's where, I know as a responsible practitioner to go to the subject matter expert who can go 30 miles deep in the right directions and say, this is the right methodology for the right thing we're trying to uncover or understand. But I think the missing piece is that doesn't scale. And that's the demand problem that the market has seen and will continue to see. And I don't think we got ahead of the understanding that we were going to need that. Like, 10 years ago, people weren't majoring in UX research. It wasn't as popular and critical as it is now. And I think that scale is just going to take off with a trajectory that we can't keep up with. And so there have to be solutions that every team member can access insights that the experts trust, and then it really takes off, and you can answer that why in a much more powerful way.
Yeah, and Mo, you're not alone, because I do the same exact thing where I sort of like, I've read Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug, both versions, and so you're sort of like, hey, I sort of know what I'm talking, and then you get it, you're like, okay, this needs someone to take it very seriously. We need an expert for this. Like, yeah. So not alone at all.
But is it like when we had Els Ertz on, because I kind of think of the going back, and we had the Monica and Anthony talking about customer journey mapping,
mm-hmm.
and both of those I think fall into, there's a degree of, I mean, it's heavily reliant on qualitative, but does it come down to, because I remember in both cases it was, you do this poorly and you can really screw yourself up. I mean, in the extreme example is when, you get some mass survey and the, survey has a busted, like the survey wasn't even tested. Like surveys will go out that are poorly, not even, there are ones that you're like, this is broken. There are ones where a survey writing or survey research expert would say, this is a totally biased question. And then you've got things like usability testing or card sorting, where it does rely on the skill of the facilitator, but does that, not to diminish the need for skill, but does the skill become more critical as your sample size is smaller? Like, is there a relationship there?
There could be a relationship there. I think it's, if you have a poorly developed test, if you got a large sample size, it's still crap data. So you have to have a framework that you trust. It has to be created right the first time, and the way in which you're asking the questions and gathering the feedback, you have to ask from multiple lenses. It's really good qual isn't just about uncovering the way people like the design of the page or the experience. It's about uncovering, do they also believe in the brand, and do they also believe in the product? And all these layers are part of one holistic understanding for the customer, and so that should be reflected. And that's where the bias can come in, is if you irresponsibly and often unintentionally introduce bias in the way you're gathering that data. That's the damage of a smaller sample size, is that bias and that anecdotal risk is there if you're not a UX research expert. But the UX research experts can't solve for the asks that they're getting at the volume that they are, right? Like they need to be embedded across every team and answering why questions across so many people. So it's important that they have a tool that they can empower. Yeah.
And their projects also typically take longer. Like it's, sometimes their work, like it's not a type of work that typically is done super fast. And like that's not to discredit UX researchers. I think they are completely
phenomenal. It's a compliment to UX research.
Yeah,
it's their job is hard, exactly, and it takes that time.
But what do you think the business needs to understand? Because like the thing, I feel like I've watched this at multiple companies now where you kind of go through this evolution and like random people are just like basically trying to do their own qual research, writing their own survey questions, whatever it is, doing their own user research interviews, or the whole barrel of mistakes. And then along, like, typically it's a UXer who actually is kind of like, I'm gonna at least steer you in the right direction because I have a little bit of experience in this. And then it kind of evolves to eventually like, oh, this is a skill set we need. What do companies need to understand, I guess, to help them get to that stage quicker and not have like old mate from marketing trying to do this work?
Yeah, I think as soon as you shortcut it at all, you lose credibility in the process. And then it sets you back that much further to then you're just getting the why. But then when you present the why that you think you found, you're getting pushback. And that's 10 times worse than just being asked why and not having the resources to responsibly source it. And so I think the best models are those that it's just an awareness, a top of mind thing. Like once we became aware that you could test and iterate, right, that became the path forward. And now it's, as soon as you understand that you need quant and qual, it's impossible to separate them. And there are ways to do that at scale across democratized teams while you have these super, I think of it as the mile wide, right? Like you need a lot of resource to be able to go a mile wide. But then the UX researchers need to go a mile or 30 miles deep, and they want to know that they're going a mile or 30 miles deep in the right direction. I had a client recently describe it as like, I want to know that I'm putting the ladder against the right house before I start to paint, because it takes me a long time to paint the house.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
It's just really applicable for all of the teams involved. There's so much time and energy and effort. You want to know that you're going in a validated direction before you make that investment.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, a lot of times in sort of digital analytics, we're used to sort of just answering whatever questions the business comes up with, and we grouse a little bit about how they might not be really great quality questions. It seems to me that because of the need to really set up experiments and design them carefully, you have to be really careful about what questions you try to get answers to, because they need to sort of have a life cycle that lasts longer than the research itself. And we do this in analytics all the time. By the time you do the analysis, you come back with the answer, nobody cares anymore because it wasn't actually that meaningful. Shout out to all my overlooked analysts out there. But like, how do you work with businesses and stakeholders to kind of help them like think a bigger picture, I guess, or ask better questions?
Yeah, I think the key, if people listening walk away with nothing else, I think the best question you can start to instill is to get people to ask, and for you to begin to ask more often, what's the insight and data that drove this priority? And if you can't answer that, it's the wrong priority to take out of the pile first, right? And if you can build an entire roadmap that's based on validation and insights and data, then you can really start to shape and determine where your effort and time should be spent next.
Jenni, I feel like you just said something so simple, but so an obvious, but like I had an epiphany. So
you're swinging back and forth from I have no clue, I'm lost.
I was going to say I've like rebuilt your faith in yourself a little bit by knocking you down on stage.
No, I actually feel like you're coaching me up the like next hill or something to the top of the next.
5 more minutes, you'll be a certified UX researcher. So that's
right.
Yeah, but I mean, it is the simple stuff that we forget the most often, right? That's the muscle we have to use daily. That's the memory we have to just have at the ready. Is wait a minute, what insight and what data brought us here? Why is this our next focus? Oh, we don't have one? All right, let's go fix that. Or, oh, we do have one? Great. And now that becomes the repeatable pattern.
But back to the flip side, I've had a client for a few years, and we kind of refer to him as a hypothesis generating machine, super motivated, always kind of thinking of new thoughts and ideas and questions, and really thinks about the business. But boy, but he keeps asking the same question. He was like, yeah, we don't understand why these customers aren't buying this product. That's kind of obfuscating the actual scenario, but we just don't understand why they're not. We know that there should be this many who should buy it. If they're buying X, they should also buy Y, and we just don't know why would you buy X and not buy Y too. And he will bring it up, and it's like, well, I don't know, maybe we should ask them. And as soon as you say that, he's like completely dismisses it. He was like, no value in research. Maybe there's some value for it somewhere. And we've tried to kind of pick away and try to figure out what his reaction is. And I think it's 2 things. One, he is over indexes to the anecdotal evidence is dangerous. And so in his mind, research is we went out and asked 4 people, and one of them said something, and we're going to run with that and treat that. Or one of them said X, and we're going to say 25% of our customers think X. So it's like, okay, well, that was what you're basing it on was either poorly done or it's a misunderstanding of what it is. But it's gotten to the point of comical. It is one question that we genuinely don't know the answer, and he keeps bringing it up, and then he keeps saying, well, we need to find it in the data. And it's like, well, that is a question where you are looking under a street lamp for your keys because that's where the light is, and that is not where you drop the key. You dropped your key off in the alley.
I literally used that analogy earlier today. I love that one.
I've never heard that analogy.
But I wonder how much is like if there was irresponsible to that point of if you say here's the why, but it was poorly done, and so it actually was not correct. Like if it's the same thing that if you don't do this well, the right tool with the right rigor, then you can burn some. For all I know, this guy had a bad experience with some sort of market research 20 years ago, and he has not let it go and won't let his teams do it again.
Look, can I just say some people are stupid? Like, I know that's an awful judgment, but, like, I haven't had coffee yet, and some people are just stupid.
I will say usually acknowledging, don't disagree. I will say usually acknowledging the pain that I'm an empath, so this is just my personal style coming out a little bit. But if in that situation, I would just say like, hey, I want to get you involved and like bought into the method that we're going to use for this so that we can confidently answer your why. Here's what we propose. I want you to help craft and make sure, and here's the buy-in to the methodology and everything that we're using so you know and trust that. And here's the volume of people that we're going to measure this to. So it's not just a little flicker of signal over here. It's actually the majority of the audience agrees and feels this way. And then once he's emotionally bought into that method to gathering it and saying, look, I want to answer this question with and for you. And I think it's a great question. I think the spirit is right, because typically the companies that embrace the why have a much more sustainable long-term positive outcome. It makes their what of the data look a lot better. And to that idea of a searchlight, oftentimes the qual is that searchlight around the room that illuminates I'm going to mix our metaphors a little bit. I don't know where he lost his keys. But it's that searchlight around the room that you suddenly turn it and it's like, oh, there is where we should be focusing. And so you get that intrinsic value. And frankly, that's also tied to the emotional value for the stakeholders a lot of times. It becomes more intrinsically valuable to as a win, and then becomes more quantifiable as a win because you understand the motivators, the desires, the propensities of the users that are driving the hypotheses that then create your next curiosity and hypothesis to follow.
It seems like there may need to be organizational precursors to effective qualitative research and experimentation. What's your reaction to that?
I think the organizations that I've seen drive value through qual, quant, or a combination the best are those that have a executive level stakeholder who is all about the customer experience and they are all about learning. And if that is their attitude, then embracing that downward and outward through the team is very easy. If not, you kind of need a maverick to start to push that narrative upwards instead to the executive stakeholder. And then you find typically you do best if you can find that really magnetic or charismatic stakeholder at the ground level and at the exec level and say, we're in this together and this is our vision and we're really going to believe in answering both the what and the why, and we're going to solve that with data and insights, and we're going to drive change that way. And then that creates that culture of asking, like, what data and insight drove this priority over and over again, because it's happening at multiple levels within the organization. That's really where the organizational change comes from. And if you can find both, great.
Okay, let's step aside for a brief word about our sponsor, ObservePoint. It's a platform that automatically audits your entire website's data collection for errors and issues. That includes testing more than just individual pages, testing your most important user paths for both functionality and accurate data collection.
ObservePoint can alert you immediately if something goes wrong, but it also tracks the results of those audits over time, so you can see if your data quality and QA processes are improving or worsening. But we all know I'm an optimist, so let's go for improving.
Absolutely. We want those quality trends going up and to the right, people. And of course, quality data collection also means respecting users' privacy. So ObservePoint now has the ability to perform privacy compliance audits to identify all the tech collecting data on your site and ensuring adherence to digital standards and government regulations for customer data.
All that, and they've got great taste in podcasts. So if you want to learn more about ObservePoint's many data governance capabilities, go request a demo over at observepoint.com/analytics power hour. Now, let's get back to the show.
Speaking of organizational change or just, structure, it's something you kind of referred to a few times about, like, basically, like, the need to be highly cross-functional, embedded. It's tough to scale. But, like, if you were setting up this type of function, how would you structure it, just hypothetically?
I'm a huge fan of, I don't even know what it's called, but I always heard it referred to as that hub and spoke. That was always my favorite, where there's a center of excellence, true center of excellence team that are the mastercraft resources. And then as you grow and scale all of the individual teams, whether that's by product or by business unit or by marketing function, you name it, then you can start to embed cross-functional resources across each one of those. But they always have that best-in-class team to go ask questions of and explore new methodologies and explore new tools and say, let's check this out together. Have we thought about this? What do we do about that? And certainly that center of excellence pod needs to be embracing of data and insights both. They need to want, they have to have an appetite for quant and qual because they have to have the appetite to answer the why. And I think the teammates and the team members, you can feel and see that curiosity in interviewing and then, asking people their most interesting test they ever ran, right? Or just like seeing them light up to describe what it was that got their fire lit a little bit. You see if that curiosity's there or not.
So when you talk about, because I feel like this is something that I'm constantly badgering people about, is like research done well is like a really good mix of qual and quant. Like they have to coexist and be so deeply interwoven. And the truth is, like, not many teams do it well. Like you've mentioned a few times, you've seen some teams that have done it well. Like what does good look like and how do people get there?
Yeah, I think The best way I can describe that is if I'm designing a testing program from the ground up today, and by testing I mean quant and qual, by the way. So to me, they can't be broken apart anymore. And so I think it is about having a team that can not only build and envision the next experiences and hear a hypothesis or a problem, but all of us are going to participate and begin from validating the problems. And that's going to be the foundation of the roadmap. And then if we can build that way, we're going to build those cross-functional resources. We're going to go forward from there and really establish the experts to say, okay, the first time we set this study up, we need to make sure that we're really thinking about it responsibly. And then it's copy paste, right? This study looks like that other study we did, so we can start to do it more often. But, having the right tool set is a critical part of that. I think there are advantages to everyone being able to responsibly gather insights with a tool that everybody, depends on and relies on. And that really is a game changer. It just opens up the scale that you don't need to hire as many people for. And you can eventually, but you create that demand that then gives you the headcount.
Is there a risk? I mean, it feels like the breadth of qualitative research tools or the types of qualitative research. I mean, card sorting, diary studies, journey mapping, persona building, like that no organization is going to have the skills and the resources to do all of those. So it seems like you have to sort of pick the subset that you have a need for. Do you run into a risk where it's like you've got everybody bought in, but all of a sudden they're using kind of the wrong qualitative research method or approach, or the less optimal to try to do something where, they're using, panel survey and they should be doing, persona building?
Yeah. I mean, I'm speaking of bias, I have bias, so I answered this with that bias. There is a difference between generative and formative level research and evaluative research. And I think evaluative research is that people who do research can be anyone on any team. And I think more of the formative and generative research, that's more of the tree testing, card sorting, UX research, expert level stuff, is that piece that you protect for the experts to be able to lead and do. But if you open their bandwidth to not be buried in the evaluative research asks all the time, then they have the ability to go that 10 miles deep. And the rest of the teams don't have to wait on them to get in a queue to go get insights for the evaluative research level that they need. So I think that's a big part of it is being able to do that at scale.
So does the generative research, generally speaking, have less of a value of being linked to quantitative? I mean, or is the evaluative, is that when you're saying the quant plus qual kind of linked together, does that index more to the evaluative?
Yeah. Evaluative is easier to tie to quant because it's typically later stage once the experience is prototype level or later, right? You're not creating the early stages of something. I think there's value in doing evaluative research of competitors or existing flows that are out there beyond just your own when you're creating something net new. So evaluative can exist throughout the process, but typically generative and formative research falls into that expert level user, and the evaluative happens once you have an experience or a design or an idea that you want to gather. And I do think one of the biggest blind spots is running research on experiences you don't own, right? Like you may have a product that exists on a multitude of marketplaces, and you should be researching it on all of those marketplaces. You could have a product that is similar to a competitive product. You should be researching that competitive product, not just your own. I think some of the biggest light bulb moments come from those.
Which not to talk about Weibo, but that was something that I had not really thought about when I saw you speaking at one conference. I don't know, say no space. There was no space between one and conference.
That's right. Thank you.
I didn't want to inadvertently think it was one conference, but was that idea of, I'm selling widgets on my website. My widgets are also available on Amazon. My competitor is selling a directly competitive. They're selling it both on their website and on Amazon. And with this sort of one of these forms of qualitative research is it's all out there public. It's just trying to get scale at getting the, users' perception of or thoughts about and being able to line those up, which does, I agree. I think that's very much our tendency is to really focus on us. It's like we think everybody, what's the exit rate on our website? Well, it's 100%. Congratulations.
That's right.
Nobody is that into your website. So, but do you not wind up with a blind spot if you're doing research where you're evaluating, because there's one way of evaluating, like a heuristic evaluation. Let's just go through and do that comparison. And then there's, I think what Wevo does is let's get, users that are in kind of whatever population we've defined to go through and gather research. But at that point, you don't have any of the quantitative behavioral stuff to marry up with that, right? You don't know how their site is performing. All you know is what your recruited users say about it. Is that right?
Yes, and I've never taken an improv class, but there you go.
I was going to say, nicely done.
Yes, and nice.
The idea of gathering all of that feedback at scale is that you can use AI and tools available to organize and theme and analyze what are the consistent messages these panelists or users are telling us about these experiences. And again, that crosses brand and credibility and UX and design and content and messaging and pricing, and all of that is one to the user, to the visitor. And in the live experiences that they go through on a daily basis, when they look at a product, headphones on a direct site, and then I go look at Amazon, and then I go look at Best Buy, and I'm thinking about which one has them closest to where I can go pick them up by the time I need them to record the podcast, right? And it's not just an online single channel experience. You need that massive feedback from all of those people across all those channels so you can stitch together a singular journey like that and say, imagine you're going through this journey and these are the different points on that you go through. And now all of you, hundreds of you per page in that journey, tell us what you think. And then we can use AI and other tools available to say, all right, now of all those open-ended responses where we didn't bias them, we didn't tell them what to think, we just truly captured their feedback. What bubbled to the top, right? Like what themes really popped out of all of that massive data? And then it becomes qualitative at a quantitative level where you can sometimes then turn that into your quantitative roadmap and say, hey, we should be digging a little bit deeper here. I think there's something going on that we've maybe not thought to explore before. And or just having that to pair with quantitative is hugely valuable.
And will that digging deeper sometimes be, we're going to actually do research again, but we're going to have a different
Absolutely.
Focus? Okay.
So that then you can go into the 10 miles deep, right? Once you understand the mile wide, now you can spend more valuable time going into the 10 miles deep. But otherwise, you're just kind of throwing darts and seeing, all right, I guess I'll go 10 miles deep there without any validation. And that's really what broader evaluative research at scale can deliver is you get that validation along with just a ton of discovery light bulbs, but you get that validation and then you know where to go spend that time and investment. I could clearly geek out about this for a really long time. Longest answers of any guest you've ever heard. Sorry.
I wish our listeners could see all of your notes because I'm like, we obviously do prep for the show and I was like, anyway, I feel like I've learned a lot.
We hope that it's obvious that we prep for the show.
Well,
right?
Yes.
Fly by night.
Okay. But anyway, what I did want to ask about is communicating qual research in terms of presentation. So like data viz is like this massive thing. We're always talking about how to present quant data. I know there's always, if I say quant and qual enough times, I always invert them at some point in time. So watch out,
You're
folks.
not alone. You're not alone.
But
as long as you say data, Mo.
That's right.
I guess is there starting to become like industry best practices when it comes to how to present qual research? Because like it is one of those things, right? Like it is very, I don't want to say timely, but like it does kind of expire. It has a shelf life. And so like
it does. Yeah.
And like typically you see people put together really beautiful presentations, which I am obviously a big fan of, but like how do you then move quickly if that's the best method of communication?
Yeah, I think consistency is key, right? If you are inconsistent in your data storytelling, it invites skepticism. And so there's a fluidity with which you need to present your key findings. There's you support this much data within our qual set, supported this theme that we've elevated, but here are some real user quotes that reflect that. So it's that combination of, real verbatims with the scale at which that was relevant. And I think it's really funny that you say it does expire. One of our clients recently came up with this brilliant idea I can't believe none of us thought of, which is, I get that I want to keep testing my own experiences and gathering qual at scale for those, right? Like I want to see what new ideas are working. I want to test across my journeys on my own site. I get that. But could you just schedule some competitor benchmarking for me on a quarterly basis? Like their sites are changing and I don't have time to keep an eye on them. And I know they're testing and optimizing, and I know their users in the marketplace is testing, and I'm just overwhelmed. Could you just plan every quarter to benchmark my competitors and look at how their experiences are changing and how that measuring stick is looking against them? And so not only does the market change, therefore the benchmarks change, but also the experiences of that set are changing. And so it's really important to be consistent with the frequency as much as you are with the way that you tell the data story really consistently over and over again.
Yeah, for some reason in my head, I think that it's easier to commit data crimes with qualitative data. And maybe it's just because I'm more used to quantitative data. But I've just seen so many poor, you do a survey and so somebody will take their opinion and pull the open-ended remarks, throw it in a slide and be like, well, our users are saying this. And it's like, you just kind of cherry-picked. I don't know.
Feel like people do that with quant data too.
They do. They absolutely do. But I data becomes very political in a lot of organizations. But to me, it seems like there's more danger.
Like it's
sometimes.
easier to weaponize almost.
What's great is when you have one product page and you say this product page has amazing engagement, and then what you don't realize is that's because you've been having qualitative research run on it and it hasn't been getting filtered out because it's a competitor who's running it. And so you can mess with somebody's data.
That's
Mo's looking at me like, what?
I did not follow that example.
I think Tim's dropping a very specific example there.
No. Well, no, in theory, right? When you're collecting research on other sites, you are generating traffic, right? It's not going to be enough
to that
volume.
Site. Yeah.
From a quant perspective, if you're inflating, visits, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think, Michael, to your question, that goes back to the bias. Like 9 times out of 10, if there is a small volume, anecdotal only evidence of user research, it's going to be met with equally anecdotal opposition, right? Like it's my anecdote versus your anecdote, my experience versus your experience, my bias versus the bias of whoever ran the study. And that's the biggest reason that you need it at scale. You get around that.
Well, I've seen executives just really upset with how dumb the users in the usability test are and why can't they get it right. And you're like, no, they're showing us what we got wrong. Don't you see?
And that's the beauty of the quality. Yeah. And you can be like, and actually this supports our exit rate, right? These are telling us the same story. And that's really where that pairing exists is we've looked at the mile wide, that told us where to go a mile deep. And now they're consistently telling us that's where the problem is and what the problem is. But now we know why it's a problem. Now we know why they're stuck, why they're not converting.
So your choice is to fix the experience, or you can go and try to educate all of the users to not fit your definition of dumb.
I will also say there is a big benefit of that, again, that buy-in piece. Like if they have a hand at all in crafting the study that you're going to move forward with and they're bought in before you run it, don't just surprise them with qualitative data. Get the buy-in and say, we're going to go understand the why of this. Cool. All right. Let's talk about that later. Yeah. Now they're leaned in.
All right. It's time for that segment, which is the conundrum du jour, the conductrix quiz, the quizzical query that sometimes puts us in a quandary. Mo and Tim, are you ready to go?
As ready as I ever am.
Exactly.
Well, let's do a quick word about our sponsor, Conductrix. A/B testing vendors sometimes promise a silver bullet to make experimentation easy, and running an effective program is really hard work. You need a technology partner that is innovative and forthright about the challenges to build and maintain that successful experimentation program. And for over a decade, Conductrix has been that partner with some of the world's largest companies to help discover and deliver effective experiences for their customers, along with offering best-in-class technology for A/B testing, contextual bandits, and predictive targeting. Conductrix always provides honest feedback and goes above and beyond to help their clients achieve their testing and experimentation goals. They also go above and beyond to do this awesome quiz. You can check them out at conductrix.com. Let's talk about who you're representing, which listeners. All right, Mo, you are representing Joe DeSalvo. So,
hello,
way
Joe.
to go. Perfect. And Tim, you are representing none other than Simon Poulton. Okay, let's get into the quiz. Now, let's just pretend that I am very eager to get the podcast recording finally started. Unfortunately, Tim and Mo are having a bit of a kerfuffle, which is keeping them from getting started. Michael asks, what seems to be the problem? Mo answers, we're arguing about p-values again. While we agree that the p-value is the probability of seeing the data, or more extreme, assuming that the null hypothesis is true, we don't seem to agree on what the distribution the p-value takes when the null really is true. Michael calmly responds, the p-value follows a blank distribution when the null is true. Now can we get going and start the recording podcast? What distribution did Michael say the p-value follows under the null? Is it A, Gaussian, B, log normal, C, gamma, D, uniform, or E, beta? This one might be easy.
I actually understand the question and yet do not have a...
I just like that I'm calm in this one.
I did notice that changed the story arc, and I wondered if perhaps you might have had influence over that.
I've been lobbying pretty heavily for weeks, so this one, I feel really good about how calm and cool I am in this one.
What depresses me is that, 99% of my team, if they ever listen to the show, would be screaming the answer at me right now.
I feel like it's a missed opportunity on your part. You could have been typing this into Slack all this time.
I can't type at the speed at which you read.
Well, but I've given you all this sort of dead air talking about how calm I am and stuff like that. Yeah. Anyways, that's fine.
So, do you want me to start with an elimination?
I mean, if you want to, that's one thing we have done in the past.
Okay.
You want to go for it, Mo? No. So I've actually spent a lot of the last couple of days actually on the log and log and log odds front, and probably am as most knowledgeable about logs as I've ever been in my life, which means they still confuse me a bit. But because the p-value is going to be between 0 and 1, it does not feel like it's a log normal type thing. So I'm going to try to eliminate B.
I love the thinking, and let's eliminate B. It's gone. Log normal, out the window. Now we have Gaussian, gamma, uniform, and beta. A, C, D, E.
Look, I'm going to eliminate beta.
You're going to eliminate beta. Okay, let's compute that. Boop, 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 boop. Yay! Yes, we've eliminated beta. So now we have Gaussian, gamma, and uniform as our only three options remaining.
This may be bad, but I don't see how it could possibly be a uniform distribution. So I'm going to aim for nixing that, because surely it's going to skew towards the smaller. So I'm going to try to eliminate uniform.
You're going to eliminate uniform. Okay, calculating. And you know how Minesweeper works?
Yeah.
Yeah, you hit the bomb. Uniform is the answer. Mo wins.
I love winning by default.
Hey,
not winning by default. What is it? Winning by?
It's just winning. Joe DeSalvo is a winner. So Mo, great job. So here's what happens. The answer is D, uniform. If the null is true, which in A/B testing usually means that the B version is not better than the control, then the p-value of the test statistic has an equal probability of taking any value between 0 and 1, which is why 5% of the time, if B variation is not better than the control, the p-value will be less than or equal to 0.05, which is the 5% alpha or 95% confidence level frequently used for A/B testing. One could argue that E, the beta distribution, is also right, since a beta is the same as the uniform when constrained under the interval 0, 1, but unless either Tim or Mo more explicitly say beta 1, 1, then the answer is not accepted. All right, I probably should have stopped reading a while ago. So, and then there is probably a way to recast the uniform as a gamma distribution, but that's also not accepted unless Mo or Tim is explicit about its construction. I think we got to the right answer. Congratulations, Mo. You're the winner. Tim, you do a great job every week, week out. So, and of course, we love doing the quiz for our listeners. And thank you, Conductrix, for sponsoring it. Please check them out at conductrix.com. You can tell they know a lot about A/B testing and p-values. All right, let's get back to the show.
Out of curiosity, are there different methods that you would use if you did have a more pressing timeline?
Again, I'm biased. Our results are really fat. Like that's frankly where I fell in love with it. Is I had a 6-week research project. By the time we could staff the people that we needed and the pages that we needed to look at, we had to pre-plan all of the different studies out of the gate. And then by the end of the first study, we wished we'd gone in a very different direction for the second and third. And now there is a way to gather all of those studies in 1 to 2 weeks, and you can do it simultaneously. Like that's the other, software isn't everything, and individual researchers aren't everything. It's the power of both together. And I think if you have the ability to do that mile wide faster and more upfront, you have a much greater, happier team. They don't get bored, they don't get frustrated. They can actually spend their time adding value instead of just saying, I can't do that by then, which is a very fair and real answer, you know.
Well, one qualitative metric we've been trying to get back to is to adhere more to our hour-long status, so we do have to start to wrap up. But, Jenni, this conversation has been amazing for a number of reasons. A, it's so easy to love that work, and you explain it so well. So I'm thrilled that our listeners got a chance to just be involved with that. That question is going to be, I wrote it down. What's the insight and the data that drove this priority? And I know I'm going to use it over and over again. So thank you so much for that. And there's so much more we could totally cover here, but we do have to start to wrap up. Anyway,
I told you, longest answers of anybody you'll ever
No.
Not true at all.
You're not even scratching the Tim Wilson watermark in terms of long-windedness, so you're fine. This is perfect. One thing we do love to do is go around the horn and share a last call on the show, something we think might be of interest to our listeners. Jenni, you're our guest. Do you have a last call you'd like to share?
I do. I am nothing but a reflection of the really smart people I have been lucky to work with. So one of those, Maddie Wishnow, recently wrote an amazing blog post called The Analytics Hangover. And it's just beautiful. I cannot recommend it enough. And in it, he talks about that combination of the what and the why. And it just, sends light bulbs off all over the place. So The Analytics Hangover. Maddie
and
Wishnow.
I assume that's different than sort of the genesis of this podcast, which was the day after at the lobby bar at a conference. That was a different kind of analytics hangover, I'm guessing.
Different.
So that's awesome.
Different,
I will check that out.
I was going to say, I can qualitatively say that 60% of anything I do well when I present publicly is due to Maddie Wishnow. So everything I learned about presenting, or 60% of what I learned about presenting effectively, was from Maddie.
Awesome. Well, Tim, why don't we go next to you? What's your last call?
So I'm going to do 2, but really it's really Jenni doing 2 because this is completely random. But at one conference, while we were having dinner, Jenni and Matt Policastro, so now all people who've been on the podcast, Jenni recommended, I don't remember why, but I believe she actually had to phone a friend, also known as a spouse, to get the actual name of it. But it's the Barkley Marathons, the race that eats its young. It's like an hour and a half long movie on YouTube, and I'm not going to lie, I'd finished watching it before I left Chicago, which meant that while not hanging out in the lobby bar, I was sucked into a 5 marathon in Tennessee, just hilarious and entertaining and fascinating documentary. So there's that. I had to use that.
The gift that keeps on giving, right there.
You do realize now, Tim, that people are going to want to come on the show because they're going to realize it's a ticket to get to have dinner with you.
Yeah, at conferences.
And talk about marathons through rural Tennessee, apparently.
But somehow it was in the opposite. I don't think time actually works to apply that. And I'm a messy eater. People don't want to do that.
Vouch for that.
I had this cotton candy hanging out of my mouth. It was weird. So a little bit more on analytics, and a former guest also, Tim Harford, and his Cautionary Tales podcast, he had a recent episode called The Mummy's Curse, which it brings together the curse of King Tut's tomb, that whole thing from like 2012 when, Target predicted a girl was pregnant with the flyer and her dad got all upset. It's got selection bias in it. It is it's a little bit of a stem winder, which maybe is why I like it as well. It goes on and about, but the fact that it ties together multiple mummy's curses with predictive analytics and Target and really comes down to selection bias. It's a good listen from a very practical analyst application if you listen to it that way.
Nice.
And that is all.
Okay. Well, that's great. All right, Mo, what about you? What's your last call?
Mine could not be more different. So I'm spending a lot of time at the moment on like team health and just checking in on how everyone's doing. We're all still working from home where I am in my part of the world, and there's definitely some fatigue. And I think regardless of where we're at, I guess the last couple of years have been pretty tough, and it's definitely taking its toll as we get to the end of the year. And big shock, Adam Grant has been in my life again. And one of the things that he has suggested doing recently, so obviously I'm like still catching up with lots of team members, and we have new team members that I haven't met. And he's like, instead of asking people what they do, ask what they love. And every conversation I've had in the last 3 weeks, I've focused on asking people what they love to do. And it has just, I had the most beautiful conversation with one of the guys in the team yesterday about cooking. I had one the other week about like the nature walks he loves doing. And like, I'm just finding it's been like a really beautiful way to connect with team members. I feel like Tim's probably going to be eye rolling over there in the corner, but
our HR department asked me to do the same thing. So I just called him up and said, "Are you doing your fucking job? Yes or no?" And then on to the next one. I had the whole thing done in an hour and a half.
But anyway, it's been something that has made me reframe, I guess, like the conversations I'm having with people. And when you talk about what people love doing, like it's the same as like, what's the favorite piece of research you've done? Like people's eyes light up, like they just get really excited, and it's like ends up being this really nice part of your day. Oh my God, I had this amazing chat with like someone that studied linguistics. Anyway, the topics go on. So yes, ask people what they love to do instead of what they do.
No, I love that you like connected it back to the why unintentionally. Like it's all about the humanity and the why. That's beautiful.
Oh my God, I'm getting uncomfortable.
I think maybe like, never mind. I'm not going to say.
Please tell me you have an academic study, Michael, to share.
Well, it is sort of data related, and I'm glad you asked. It's a little while back I ran across this, and it's humorous, but sort of it's interesting. So there's a guy named Matt Turk who's a venture capitalist, and he's and some other people have put together a 2021 machine learning, AI, and data landscape. So I'm a sucker for these big landscape slides with all of the crazy 8,000 vendors and what have you. So this is now the data and AI one. Hilariously, Adobe apparently does not make it onto there in any category. So I don't know how thorough it is, but it is interesting and worth taking a look at. And certainly, for all of you agency folks like me out there who need a big old landscape slide for your decks, there's another option out there for you.
Did you actually look for Adobe Sensei? Because I think it's if you were just looking for Adobe, but we're looking for the AI engine, the Adobe Sensei.
I looked. I'm not saying I exhaustively looked because all the little logos are really small, but I was looking for the Adobe logo and I couldn't find it. Anyways, it's interesting. I don't think it means it's complete, but there's some other things in there that are kind of nifty, and it probably is a good resource. And we all need these things because, of course, there's a bajillion and one vendors out there for all these things. So is that not touchy-feely enough for you, Tim? Because I was sort of like, hey, Jenni and Mo, let's go start a different podcast just talking about how to lead people and really interact and and I thought that would be fun.
It's all a balance. It's all about.
That's right. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing the last calls, everyone. And I know if you've been listening, you're probably thinking, hey, I've got some ideas about this, or I'd like to ask some questions. We would love to hear from you. The easiest way to do that is on the Measure Slack or on Twitter or on our LinkedIn group. And, you can also email us at contact@analyticshour.io. So we'd love to hear from you. Anyway, Jenni, thank you again for coming on the show. This was great.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And of course, no show would be complete without a mention of our illustrious producer, Josh Crowhurst, who does so much to make this show do what it do. So thank you, Josh. And for my two co-hosts, Tim and Mo, no matter what kind of data, qualitative, quantitative, I know I speak for both of them when I say, keep analyzing.
Thanks for listening. Let's keep the conversation going with your comments, suggestions, and questions on Twitter at @AnalyticsHour, on the web at analyticshour.io, our LinkedIn group, and the Measure Chat Slack group. Music for the podcast by Josh Crowhurst.
So smart guys wanted to fit in, so they made up a term called analytics. Analytics don't work.
Analytics. Oh my God, what the fuck does that even mean?
Should I be honest and actually admit that I wrote that today? But I was like, I'm going to pretend that I'd actually.
You don't have to
Tim!
say. No, you have all kinds of grace.
No, but I love that you had a moment of being a human for once. That's important because I fuck up all the time.
Yeah. Okay. So it makes us feel more connected to you as a person, Tim, and that's a positive.
Hoo-ha, hoo-ha, hoo-ha.
Rock flagging. Why? Why? Why?
I feel like that might be one of your best.
I know. It was reverberating.
Reverberating?
Yeah, there was
reverberating.
Reverberating. Well, I can't talk good. Yeah.
You got an analytics hangover?
Yeah, I've got an analytics hangover. Had one for years. Different kind.